Welcome everyone to the 38th episode of My Career, My Identity series. If you don't know history, then you don't know anything. You are a leaf that doesn't know it is part of a tree. Welcome everyone to the 38th episode of My Career, My Identity series at Dr. Benny Paradi, Vidum Vidyana YouTube channel. Today, we discuss the nature, skills, academic and career possibilities of history. And we have the best available resource person with us to answer and clarify the doubts on the subject history. Father Dr. Pius is a historian par excellence. He is one of the top 10 international maritime historians. His maritime, medieval, and ocean history research works and publications are of great academic relevance. He has established his authority in these areas. His life speaks of a very successful academic journey. The fellowships and achievements to the credit of Dr. Pius are enormous. Jornada of Dom Alexis de Meneses, a Portuguese account of the 16th century Malabar, is a very famous classical contribution by Professor Pius. Professor Pius, after long years of academic leadership and contribution, now moving for a unique and important responsibility. Interacting with Dr. Pius, an established successful historian, would help youngsters to know various aspects, skills, and concepts of history. Anybody can make history, but only a great man like Father Dr. Pius can write it in the integrity of life for the future generations. Shakespeare speaks, there is a history in all men's lives. Dr. Pius has learned and marked his unique position internationally. His learning, journey, and his personality can motivate many because there is faithfulness, presence of core values, and life of a visionary that have been so well executed all through the different levels and challenges of the life of Professor Dr. Pius. Lincoln told fellow citizens, we can't escape history. Today, youngsters are interacting with Dr. Pius to know the discipline of history and its skills, to learn from the vast experiences of Dr. Pius. The platform of My Career and My Identity opens ways for the youngsters to interact with passionate visionaries and established professionals who have worked hard and claimed success in their God-given unique areas. And this is the 38th episode. Subscribe the channel for the upcoming episodes. It is not just history, but successful academic journey, mesmerizing personality, vision of life, perspectives, principles of life, etc. are all very charming areas that are to be asked and discussed with Dr. Pius. He was instrumental for many students to attain international positions and gain qualities for brilliant academic leadership all over the world. His mentoring spirit and dedication are core to his personality, a jewel to the researchers and historians. Dear youngsters, let us interact with Father Dr. Pius. And Confucius has directed, let us study the past to define the future. Respected Reverend Dr. Pius Malayakandathil, warm welcome to this current episode of My Career, My Identity. Now, over to you, Father Dr. Pius.
Thank you very much, Father Benny. Thank you very much, the listeners. I'm so delighted to be a part of the video programs that Father Benny has been organizing and arranging for the youngsters to inspire them and to find right career and right identity in their pursuits, academic pursuits. And I've been very much aware of the fact that he has been contributed a lot in the domain of knowledge, production of knowledge, dissemination of knowledge, and taking students and youngsters to new vistas of life. So, congratulations, Father Benny, and the knowledge seekers. Uh, as you know, history is differently understood by people uh, at different junctures of time. For some, history is the past. For some others, everything that happened in the past, the totality of the past, everything that man has done, everything that man has done and spoken and thought about, they constitute history. But we know that that doesn't form the type of history that we learn, that we study in our schools and our colleges and universities. So there is a filtering that is happening with regard to what history is. Everything that man does, everything that man speaks, and everything that man thinks, though constitutes history, doesn't form the academic history. The academic discipline of history is entirely different. In the academic discipline of history, what we study is change. Change over time. Change is movement from one point to another point. So change that is happening over a period of time is being studied by historians. What is interesting is that past is dead and gone. We cannot recall the past. It's dead. It doesn't come alive. So the dead past and the present person who is going to study history finds it difficult to understand history because there's a wide gap between the dead past and the present person who is going to study history. The historian can maximum do is to study the thought process. Thought process, again I reiterate. They are studying the thought process that went into the shaping of a certain type of human action, a certain type of human behavior, a certain type of human words. They have been produced because of certain type of thought process. So historians are studying the thought processes. The thought process that actually shape the society, the humanity, the civilizational progress that man is making. So these all come into the domain of historical study. I shall simplify the things a little further. The study of man in society. Man, when he lives in society, is being influenced by the society and he is influencing the society. So the change that is happening in man or the society over a period of time, because of a multiple reasons, this is what historians are studying. Not every change, not every aspect of human action, but the significant, most significant actions only we study in history. We early morning we get up, we wash our face, we comb our hair. Though they are human actions, we don't study them because they are not significant events. Significant events would mean those events which are impacting the society considerably. Sometimes it impacts several generations, influences several people of several countries. So this is what historians are doing. They are studying changes that happen among human beings who live within a society, and they study the most significant changes. Students may find it very difficult to study history because they consider history as memorizing year, memorizing date, and memorizing certain events. It's something preparatory, memory exercise is a preparatory exercise to get a sense of chronology, to get a sense of geography. Human actions happen within certain geography, certain space. So one should know a bit of geography. It happens at certain junctures of time. So one should know a bit of chronology. But history is not date alone. It is not year alone. It is not place name alone. Unfortunately, when you study history in the schools, you are compelled to mug up place names, year, and dates for no reason at all. But when you go further at the degree level and post-graduation level, what you are doing is you are not memorizing these things. You are looking into the thought process that went into the shaping of certain set of human actions. What are thought process? Who initiated this thought process? And what were the impacts? We are also studying the socio-economic dynamics of a society. Society is being moved by certain actors in society. Economy also is stimulated by a certain set of actors. So we are studying these actors and players, not their physicality, but their thought process. We are studying the thought process as to understand the past as much as possible. So when you come to degree level, when you come to PG level, when you come to MPhil level or research PhD level, you are studying not emperor's name, you are not studying the year in which certain things happen or the date in which certain things are found, happened accidentally, but you are studying the thought process. That when the shaping of a country, of a region, of a nation. So you're studying a region specific study has been done, analysis has been done as to understand how that society developed in that particular way. How is its economy happened to be so? So we are doing analysis. So instead of memorization that has been a part of history study exercise, this at the level of standard 6 and 7 and 8, or even 9 and 11. Here, the intellectual faculty that is at work is analysis and critical thinking. So they are using the methods of criticism or critical study as to understand the past. And then on the basis of their critical analysis, they are writing books, they are bringing out information about the past, and they are provided to us in the form of books. And out of the books, teachers have formulated certain sections as part of the textbook, as part of our classroom exercise books. So the historian's role is something different from the role of mere transmitting what actually happened in the past. But instead, their role is to present before the society answers for the problem that they are facing today. Why research is being done? To show that there's an answer for you. Because the present comes out of the past. Past is the root, present is the fruit. So if you want to understand the present, you have to understand the past. So past is studied as to understand the present and to plan for the future. A child, baby child, gets burned when he keeps the hand over the lamp. Mother may say, child, don't do it, your hands may get hurt. Mama, you don't know? That used to happen Earlier when you were young, but now it won't get, my hand won't get hurt. But the child who hits the hand on the lamb gets his hand hurt, then this is memory. Then he won't go to the lamb, he won't keep the hand over the lamb because he has the memory of that pain that he got when he kept the hand over the flame. This memory is individual memory. But the society has got a collective memory. The memory of each individual plus the memory of the people in the neighborhood, they all, if they share the same type of memory, there is the history. Because they are the participants of events, they are witness to the events, and they transmit this information verbally through mouth. That's oral transmission. So we all, knowingly or unknowingly, share this collective memory and we pass on this information orally. On the way to school, I happened to find a cat. The cat was crying. So everything that you narrate has got a root, something in history, something you are recalling from the memory. And then those who have seen the same cat, they will also join and add his perspective or her perspective. And the collective memory sharing or information sharing happens orally. When you write down history, then the collective memory is transferred to written history. The dead past is now transferred to written history. And with the written book and the past happening, the dead past, they should correspond. They should go hand in hand. If there's an exaggeration on what you are written, and it's then if there's an exaggeration, and if there is a difference between what happened and the present book writing process, then it's not history. There are several cases where history is distorted. There are several cases where history is manipulated. What happened in the past is one thing, but for political advantages, for getting more acceptability for a certain set of people, they rewrite history in such a way that they distort the past, they distort the truth, and they give a falsified image about the past. And we call it a myth. It's not a history, it's myth. We have seen it happening everywhere. To the time of Hitler, that happened, and to the time of other autocrats, same thing happened in different parts of the world. One should be cautious about it, and they should be aware of the dangers of political uses of history, falsification of truth, tampering the truth for political mileage, for political advantages. These are all painful things that we remember from the early days of world civilization. And today also we find it in different parts of the world. So history is a subject that can be differently used for purposes other than epistemological, other than mere knowledge-based understanding. It's a powerful weapon in the hands of power mongers. They may use it for any type of assertions, political mileages. So we have seen many cases are increasingly using history for political mileages, for dividing the society on the basis of communal lines, to polarize the community into one or two or three groups. so that the majority may always support them and they may always remain in power. It's a dangerous exercise, we know. Leave aside this dangerous impact that history can have on political exercises and polity. Think of other advantages of history. We study history mainly to understand the past and to address the problems of the present and to plan for the future. As a result, the administrators were often taken from history people who are knowing history. They were preferred in ancient Chinese civilization for selection for civil service. Even in India, history is an important subject for civil service exams because you know what happened in the past, whether it's a good thing or bad thing. The mistakes you should not repeat in the future. The good things you should repeat, and you know how good results are there, and what are the conditions with which good results can be produced. So history gives you lessons about what to do and what not to do. As a result of which, administrators are always encouraged to have a strong grounding in history. And people who know the history, they are good administrators. They do the administration very well because they, at the time of mistake, they suddenly remember, oh, in the past, there was a similar situation and those who did this way finally ended up in mistake. I should not do that. I should avoid it. I should go for the alternative path. There I should see the possibilities of avoiding the mistake. And he formulates the lessons as to tide over the vulnerable trajectories and then go for the areas which can bring him success. So it has a good chance for students who are aspiring for civil service. It gives you a sense of the past, gives you it takes you to the collective memory of humanity, and which helps you to address the problems of the present, which helps you to plan for the future. At the same time, it also tells you where to be cautious and when to be cautious and when to be alertful. Then it promotes critical thinking. History persons can critically analyze events, developments, and even documents, or written documents, or even things that have been said in the normal conversation. They analyze critically the words and sentences layer-wise, and then they take each layer separately and see what is probable thing, what is the falsified or tampered aspect of that statement, what is the correct aspect of the statement. So this layer-wise analysis usually helps them to analyze events and things and developments threadbare. So they are very good journalists. As a result of which, history people usually become good journalists, and they are good judges as well. Because they can judge things rather impartially. History writing is supposed to be neutral, is supposed to be non-biased, is supposed to be non-prejudicial, is supposed to be non-subjective, it should be objective. That's the whole desideratum, that's all the desired goal in history. But sometimes historians fail miserably, but despite that, they are inclined, they're trained to be seekers of truth, to be objective, to be impartial, to be very much straightforward and find the truth. And pronounce the truth. So they are supposed to be truth seekers. So this is what I thought of just introduce, thought of saying when introducing history. So I just introduced the difference between history as a discipline and history in our normal parlance. And even in history as a discipline, we find period-wise difference is there, ancient period history is there, medieval history is there, modern history is there, maritime history is there, agrarian history is there, social history is there, economic history is there. These branches of history actually come because of the type of human activity that the historians are focusing on. What is the basis of the type of human activity the historians study and focus on? The human activities and the domains are segmented into different categories. Accordingly, there are different categories of histories, and there are different areas of specialization which historians are involved in. And finally, we find different branches of history coming up. So these are the general, sort of introduction that I thought of giving you about history. History as a discipline, history as a social science, history, the use of history and the misuses of history, the political misuse of history, which you are all familiar with. I don't want to dwell upon it. And at the same time, we as youngsters and the people who are knowledge seekers, we have in our mind a certain a tendency to know history of our own families, family history, the history of our own land, the history of our own Sarawad, the history of our region, our place, the history of our church, the history of the community to which I belong. Because history is an identity stamping mechanism. Unless and until you know your history, you don't get the feel of identity. You say you are Malayali, but if you don't know the Malayali history, you don't get the feel of being in a Malayali. The identity feel won't be there. You said you are an Indian. You don't know the history of India. You don't feel like having the identity of an Indian. So the legacy, the heritage of being an Indian is very much embedded in the very history of the land, the very culture which shapes our own identity, the very society that formulates our own being, the very economy that sustains us, they all contribute our own identity. But it's all being rooted, all being embedded in our history. So knowing history is knowing our own identity. So when I say that we are studying history, we are studying, we are making efforts for understanding our own identity. So academically, it's a discipline that takes you to teaching level at the colleges, in the schools, the universities, and it's also a discipline that facilitates clearance of civil service exam. And at the same time, it helps you clear all the competitive exams. Every competitive exam includes questions from current and contemporary events. Current and contemporary events. Well, it can also be renamed as general knowledge. So they all come as part and parcel of history. So all career seekers should have a bent of history so that they may easily crack UPSC exam, whether it's a lower bureaucracy exam or the upper bureaucracy exam or the competitive exam that will be held in the state level or the national level. If you want to clear, there should be a historical bent, a historical mind, so that clearance could be easily done. At the same time, you can develop history as a career. I developed history as a career. I didn't want to develop history as a career initially because I just studied history for the love of history. Later, having given job, I started at Pius JNU College as Father Benny told. And then I was read at Goa University in history, then read at Calgary University in history, then JNU. In 2006, I joined JNU and I've been a professor there for the last 14, 15 years. And I love history because there's a passion in me for history. Because it's almost like the dream subject that you can ever think of. So my being and identity and career, they're inseparable. And when I teach history, when I start giving lessons on history, I forget myself. Then because there's no borderline from the heart, I mean, borderline between my heart and the overflow of my historical analysis and my historical explanations, because it's very much a part of my blood and my being. So now I'm moving over to a different domain, different area, different area of work, but still I maintain that love for history. So I'm so glad that so many people are there to listen to this talk, and you want to develop interest in history and historical themes and historical issues. And on the basis of your questions, I shall answer and give explanations which may give more clarity to things and the themes that I just gave you as an overview. So thank you very much.
Okay, now youngsters, you can start asking your questions.
Thank you, Father, for your wonderful insight. So my question is, learning history is a complicated process. Some identify it as remembering dates and places. Some other think of focusing on concepts and also their perspectives and ideologies playing major role. In this confusing scenario, where does a student focus while studying history for the sake of competitive exams?
Good, thank you. When you're at the school level, place names and dates, they are important. Now, in the present NCERT textbook, we are reduced the chronological factor and geographic as much as possible, because we are given theme-wise lessons for the NCERT textbook. With this experiment, and many students find it easier. Earlier, they were compelled to mug up a date of certain developments and year of certain developments, as well as the place names. But everybody may not be good in mugging up. And that's not the excellent intellectual faculty that a human being has got. Is one among the intellectual faculties that the human beings are being endowed with. So memory or memorization or mugging up is the lowest among the faculties of intellectual nature. Critical thinking is there, there's evaluative mind, there's analytical mind, there's technical mind, and there's memorizing mind. And so now there's a more and more effort to reduce this type of memorization exercise. But still, one should have a general understanding about the chronology. Say, if you say 1605, what happens 1605? Suddenly you are reminded of many things. 1605, Akbar died. 1605, around 1605, that time Queen Elizabeth died. 1605, the Dutch came to Calicut. 1605, many things happened around the world. So many things that happen around the world, they come to your mind and remain there as in the background, giving a frame of reference, giving you chances for connecting with other geographies, other types of developments that happen elsewhere. Or 1800, 1805, it's connected with Nepal, it's connected with Chakra, it's connected with Welcome to Kalava. Many things are coming to your mind simultaneously, and see whether the development that you're looking at is connected with any of these developments that happen in the local level, regional level, national level, and the international level. So the sense of chronology should be there. That's important. And sense of geography should also be there. Though I don't promote mugging up. Second thing, when you're growing up and the study of history, you are studying more concepts to understand the social change, to understand the social phenomenon and the social reality. As I mentioned earlier, we are studying the man in society. We are not studying the man in isolation. So the more complex the society is, more complex is the type of relationship that evolves between man and the society. And this complex relationship needs to be explained through new concepts, through new vocabularies. And when you grow up, we study these new concepts and new types of vocabularies, which are capable enough to explain the complex relationship between the individual and society. So that's a difference, because we are doing more and more analytical and much more critical studies at the higher levels, at the MA level and the PhD level. Okay?
Good afternoon, Father.
Good afternoon.
My question to you is, there are different definitions of history, like history, his story, or somebody's story. But what is history for you?
History, as I mentioned earlier, people say it originates from the Greek word historia. Historia would mean inquiry. It's an inquiry, historia. It's from this Greek word, the Latin word, and the Indian English word history. Latin word historia, and the English word history has taken origin. So it means inquiry into the past. Inquiry into the past. The man lives in the present. The person who is studying the past lives in the present. And the things that about which he is studying is in the past. So he is traveling in time through a mental process. He cannot travel physically. He is traveling through a mental process as to understand, as to make an inquiry into the past. The German word is Geschichte. It comes from the German root Geschehen, to happen. Everything that happens is a part of history in German understanding. So for me, if you ask me what is history is, as I mentioned earlier, general parlance, general understanding history is the study of the past, the study of man in the past, the man in society in the past, the changes that is happening among human beings when they are living in the society, the complex relationship, the conflicts, the compromise, the negotiation that they are making, the partnership that they are making, the cheating they are doing, the wickedness that they are practicing. They all form part and parcel of historical studies. Entertainment culture that they develop, the status groups that they formulate, how they formulate the status group, the type of hierarchy that they create, where somebody is kept at the top. Who is kept at the top? Why should they be kept at the top? Why should the X be kept at the bottom? Shuddhas on the bottom, Brahmins at the top. Why can't somebody else be kept at the top? So we are looking at these social dynamics, these changes. The person at the top need not be always there at the top. He can be down. To the time of Buddhism, Brahmins were down. They were not at the top. When the English were there, Brahmins were not at the top. The English people were at the top. So the top doesn't mean always one set of people. The bottom doesn't mean only one category of people. It keeps on changing. So we are looking into these complex dynamics that's happening in society, the type of relationship. And for me, as a discipline of history, I look at history of the neglected ones. People who are unattended to. People who are not studied. If you look at my historical works, I focus more on the areas, the people, the communities, and the segments which are rather unattended to by the mainstream historians. I try to bring them into mainstream debates. They are being integrated into national historical debates. So for me, they also have got a history. Unfortunately, many of them do not have written records. All these studies are have been done on the basis of evidences. Who are capable of creating evidences and who are capable of maintaining evidences? Only the powerful and the wealthy. The fisher folk, they do not have materiality to sustain their past records. The tribal folk, or people who are living in the peripheral areas, they don't have enough resources to produce records. So I have been working on records, documents, evidences, and I've been trying to bring out the history of the people and areas which are not very much discussed and debated in the national level. So I bring them to national level discussion. I try to bring them for historical discussions and debates so that there may be equal weightage to people on the periphery and people on the borderline. So this is how I look at it. And these people also have got a complex system of social change over a period of time that needs to be looked into, that needs to be analyzed, that needs to be brought before the academicians for study. Okay.
Thank you, Father.
Good evening, Father.
Good evening.
May I know what is the benefit of learning history and what are the career scope of history?
As I mentioned earlier, history is a good lesson. Those who study history, they derive lessons from the past to avoid mistakes and to do good things. Because similar situations may happen in the present times or the future. Those who learn history, study history, they know that, okay, in the past, these things happen, and those who did this way, they failed, and those who did the opposite way, they succeeded. So history gives you lessons and tells you when to, what to avoid and what to be sought after. That's one of the most important things. Second sense that it gives is the sense of identity. Those who, why people are studying history, family history, or regional history, or history of an institution, to understand their identity. The self is better understood and placed within the historical context. The history study has to have a sense of identity, self-pride, self-esteem. You get all these things only when you know the history. If you are a Muslim, if you are a Christian, or if you are a Hindu, you study history accordingly so that your identity may be understood within the religious frames. But there are people who go outside those frames and they are trying to understand their identity within the national frames. Or there are people who want to identify their self with the language frame. And they say, okay, this language, this region, though it's part of Karnataka, did not use Kannada. It was using Tulu and a broken form of Malayalam. So we were not using Kannada. The Mangalorean part of Karnataka, they were using Tulu language. And they claim a different type of identity. So history learning would give you a good sense of identity, self-esteem, and self-pride. But as I mentioned earlier, the chauvinistic understanding of history and use of history may lead to inhuman deeds, including crimes of inhuman nature, as Hitler did and many others did, and many others are doing even now. So political use of history, what should be cautious about, But the normal cultural understanding of history is very much beneficial for the individual as well as for the society. A child who doesn't remember the past mistake, they repeat the mistake. Similarly, a community not knowing its own history will repeat the same blunder. If the community members do not study history of its own. So this is the reason why people are being generally going for history. People like me, we have moved to history just like for reasons of passion and then for teaching purpose. At the university level, we have to be updated constantly with the new historical knowledge that has been produced in different parts of the world, which made us go for every type of historical piece of information that are available. So multiple are the reasons for studying history. Okay?
Thank you, Father.
Good evening, Father.
Good evening.
Father, manipulation of history and rewriting of history happen around us. How do the students approach history and rewriting of history happen around us? How do the students approach history and what are the practical ways of assimilating history?
Yeah, manipulation history is done normally for certain partisan interests. The party in power or the group which wants to get predominance in the locality, or certain power groups may also want to get upper hand. So they create history in the way they want so that they may get upper hand. It's a power exercise. It's a power assertion. One should be on one's own guard against this development about manipulation of history. Usually, historians, what they do is they don't look at the history book without looking into the historian. Before reading the book, you should read the historian. If the historian doesn't have the culture of telling truth, that book is nothing but a waste. In present day historic understanding, we call it historiography. The author has his own or her own understanding about history. Sometimes manipulated history, sometimes compared history for the vested interest of the historian or the group to which he belongs or the party to which he belongs. If you study the historian, his history, it would mean the history of the historian, then you know whether the person is worth reading, whether the work is worth reading. If he has a culture of manipulating history for promoting the interests of the community to which he belongs, or for promoting the interests of the party to which he is affiliated, then better not to read the book. So, my suggestion to you youngsters is, there are hundreds of thousands of books, history books, but only very few books survive as excellent scholarly works. Well, many of the works are indicative of the partisanal view, the prejudice and bias of the author. So they all ignore such books. So read the historian, understand the historian, and if he has a bias, if he has some sort of partial approach to certain community or party, then one should be biased, one should be a bit cautious, because whatever he tells may contain 40% or 50% truth, and the remaining 50% may be falsification, tampering, manipulation. So avoid such things. Even the 40% may look like truth, but they have given that 40% the color of falsehood. So this is the general understanding that historians follow when they look at falsified history, manipulated history. That's why historians are against manipulation. Well, they are capable of writing the best history, but they are tampering with the truth. They are giving falsification and they are giving wrong information. They're deceiving. If you ask the way to reach Faridabad, you tell me, okay, you go to Mayur Vigar phase 3, then you go to Noida, then you go to Okala, then you go to Faridabad. Half the way is true. But from Okala, you can go to Faridabad. But the remaining half is false, right? Did the person make me travel extra unnecessarily? This is equivalent to tantamount to falsification, cheating, and it's equivalent to telling lies. Okay?
Thank you, Father.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Father. So my question is like history for exams and history for lives. Is there a difference between the two? Also, does our education system integrate both of these?
History for exam, true. Because it all depends upon what level we are. So if you are a student at the school level and undergraduate level, you follow the textbook. There's a frame of reference with which you are evaluated. That is a textbook. So textbook contains the basics of information related to an event, related to development. That basic should be there when you answer the question. So if it is examination at the lower level, schools, colleges, undergraduate level, it's a textbook-based exercise because the information that you can derive may be only from textbook. But when you go to postgraduate level, you get more information from other books. And you are supposed to give plurality of information, plurality of perceptions about the event. Whereas at the school level, you are supposed to give only a homogenized information, one single type of information. When it comes to postgraduate level, you have to give information from different scholars, how they look at it, how they view it. And then you have to make your own evaluation. And then you make your own assessment and on the basis of which you are being graded. So what I'm trying to say is that at the school level, all the teachers may not be so much familiar with all the perspectives and shades of opinion about a development. For them, that the frame of reference is textbook. So textbook following is the best thing at the school level and at the undergraduate level. And some extra reading can also be done. They can also add up to your mark. But if it is different from what is given in the textbook, don't give it in the school level. But the PG level, divergences have got space. Difference of opinion can be expressed. Different viewpoints can be expressed. Because there is no one single, the same document can be interpreted differently. And these differences in the interpretation comes because of different approaches by the historians. And the truth, elements of truth may be there in all the statements of the historians. And then you can write in your own personal words how you look at it. And your ability in judging the multiple voices, the multiple interpretations, that's also being considered while grading you the mark. So, studying for exam has got a different approaches at different levels. The school level is one, postgraduate level and FE level, it's entirely different. The other possibility that you refer to is just study history. It's popular history. It's not there's an academic history and a popular history. Read everything and understand things in the way one pleases. That's not academic history. Academic history has the rigor of critical analysis. It should be subjected to critical analysis. It should test the, it should overcome the tests of truth. The testing whether it's a truth or false. So one can develop this popular history style. They can read, understand, internalize things, and explain things which are not part of academic history, which is a part of a popular history or general understanding of the past by ordinary lay people. Their writing and their historical understanding may not get academic acceptability. For getting academic acceptability, it should test the methodology and the tools of critical analysis, which is done through the discipline of history. Okay?
Yes, Father.
Good evening, Father. My question for you is, you have been in this academic field for such a long time and in JNU for 15 years. As you had an incredible journey, could you please share about your progress, challenges, and contributions?
As I mentioned earlier, I started, my interest in history starts with my option for history. That is the first I took BA in history from Kerala University. I got ranked there. Then I opted for MA in history. Then again, there I got rank. Then my superiors wanted to appoint me in colleges. So they sent me for higher studies, that's history. I went for historical studies in Pondicherry University. I got first rank and gold medal from Pondicherry University. And the university authority sent me to Portugal for research, learning Portuguese language and research. Then I came back to Kerala and I started teaching at Pala St. Thomas College. Meanwhile, I learned Portuguese language and French language. Then I applied to Madras German consulate to learn German language. They gave me scholarship to study German language from Max Muller Pune. Basing on this German knowledge and certificate that I got, I applied to German government for scholarship to do my remaining part of PhD and the postdoctoral research in Germany. The government of Germany granted me scholarship to go to Germany. I completed my PhD, did my postdoctoral research in Heidelberg University, Germany. Earlier in 91, 92, I was in Lisbon for my Portuguese language and Portuguese research. So the knowledge in different languages, starting from Portuguese, then later I learned Dutch, then learned Italian, then French, then I learned a bit of Spanish, and so several languages I learned. Meanwhile, some 13 languages. This is Malayalam, English, and Tamil. A bit of these three languages setting aside. And Latin I learned Greek as well. So 13, 14 languages. After reaching JNU, I learned Persian. I attended Persian class for one semester, and because of hectic schedule, I could not proceed any further. So what I'm trying to say is that these multiple languages expanded my intellectual faculties and capabilities. So studying language, learning languages will help to expand your intellectual capability. Second thing, it enabled me to consult documents in multiple languages of the 16th and 17th centuries. So in these institutions, where I taught and researched, the knowledge in different languages did really help me. And most of the books that I have written, if you go through it, I have consulted documents in different languages, German, Portuguese, Dutch, Italian, different languages being the documents are different languages. I consulted them. They've given me a different position in the academic world because I have seen, I have consulted, I used documents which many of the Indian historians could not access to because of the language problem. So what I am trying to say is that if you ask me about my career, my history career, my historical studies and the language learning trajectory both went hand in hand and both helped me. The knowledge in languages helped me to acquire more and more information about the past from documents preserved in different languages, which helped me to interpret the past in a much more convincing way to the academic world, which gave me acceptability before the larger academic world. So this is how I look at my past and my trajectory as a historian, as a researcher, and as a person who was in the pursuit of knowledge. This is how I look at it. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Father.
Good afternoon, Father. So my question for you is that, as you have mentioned earlier, like youngsters who are preparing for the civil service exams are challenged to learn and interpret history. So what do you think the methods and approaches that they should adopt in order to learn history?
Civil service sector has got a component of history, as I mentioned earlier. It comes in different forms. It's a current and a contemporary affairs. So general knowledge is also another component. So people who are good in history, they can fare well in my civil service exam. So my exhortation to students who are preparing for civil service is that they have to increase the vocabulary. In history, like in any other discipline, you should have the proper vocabulary to describe or to explain a concept or a development or a happening. The vocabulary should be exactly appropriate for explaining that particular event, a particular situation. So good vocabulary you should have, mastery over the language. Second thing, you should have some sort of mastery over the current and the contemporary affairs. Particularly what is happening, that would come under the contemporary history and the modern history. What happens in the present world? So it's something that's coming closer to general knowledge. You had to read Hindu or Indian Express, particularly the lead article sections, where you learn new language, new vocabulary, because the school language is one thing. The academic language or the language which you have to nourish and cherish is some sort of sublime language, some sort of refined language that you get from the editorial or the lead articles of Hindu or Indian Express. So read them, and these articles throw light into many of the contemporary issues, contemporary problems. So knowing history, knowing current and contemporary developments in the world, which are part of the contemporary history and modern history, they help you very much at the time of civil service exam. Not only civil service exam, all UPSC exams. In Kerala, there is a Kerala Administrative Service exam. And anybody can apply. Anybody can be recruited, provided the person clears the exam. Then the person is promoted. You can all apply, you can all try for that. So history is a major component Don't be worried about the vastness of history. Slowly, you will be able to master it. If you are given a big cake, you may wonder where to start with. Everywhere you start with a small slice. And even studying history, you start with a small slice. The next day you can again have another slice of history. And eventually you will be able to master history. And mastering history will take you to any, will enable you to clear any competitive exam on par with UPSC. Okay? So I wish you all the best for the people, particularly the aspirants of civil service exams. Okay?
Okay, Father, thank you.
Father, my question is, communal divisions bring discussion on historical events and facts. There is a polarizing in interpreting historical facts. What is the result of it, and how should students approach this?
As I mentioned earlier, communal rights do happen when too much emphasis given to religion, religiosity, etc., etc. So religion is good, religiosity is all equally good, but to be communal is dangerous. To be sectarian is dangerous. Very often, histories of victory, histories of subjugation, histories of suffering are being circulated for the purpose of polarization. We know that in the recent past, for political purpose, political leaders are very much keen to create communal histories. To materialize communal polarization. When it comes to religion, or religion-based understanding of society, people are suddenly provoked, and they can be converted a social base for the political party which tries to grab power. What I'm trying to say is that, as I mentioned earlier, political manipulations, political tampering, historical tampering happens for the purpose of communal polarization, for the purpose of grabbing power, for the purpose of preservation of power, for the purpose of assertion, for the purpose of subjugation of the weaker communities, weaker religious groups. Students should have a certain type of attitude that will keep them away from, the communal understanding. Meaning,
I think Father has maybe some technical issues, or we will just wait for a few more minutes because he has.
Right now.
Yeah, not clear.
I guess he got a call right now.
No, yes, he's back. He's back. Ask the next question. Next question. We go for last 2 or 3 more questions. He's joining.
Good evening, Father. So my next question is, how can children identify?
Wait. He has. Ah, yes, his father is okay. You can ask. You can ask.
Okay. Good evening, Father. So my question is, how can children identify their interest for history and practice skills of history in their daily life situations?
Father Pius, you are muted. Are you able to listen? You need to unmute and speak.
No.
Okay. Yes. It is.
Sorry. So what happens in now I am using my phone because the computer is not working now. So okay. So what I'm trying to say is that knowingly, unknowingly, we practice history every day and every time. When we say that in our younger days things were better, that means there's a past when things were better. We said that when we were in Kerala, things were better or things would look like this. There's a sense of history. Or when we speak of this dress doesn't fit me, that means there's a past that makes this dress unsuitable to you. So everywhere there's a sense of history, but we may not be conscious about it. So what I'm trying to say is that this unconscious reference to the past should be brought to our mind and make it as a conscious. Draw lessons from the past of the nation, draw lessons from the past of the other communities, and then try to address the present situation and see whether the present situation can society where they are applicable for planning a better future for us. As I mentioned earlier, history is not for the sake of history that we are studying. It is for understanding the present. It is for the sake of solving the problems of the present that we are studying history. It is for planning better for the future that we are studying history. So here, some sort of, even if the student is not a history person, a person who if he has not taken history for his academic future, he should always think about the past and address the present and always plan for the future. This is tip we say every time. You should have a dream in your future. You should have a plan in your future. You should have something to dream about for the future. And for dreaming, for planning for the future, you draw inspiration, lessons from the past. That should be done. That can be done. And at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, try to understand the community that you belong to. What will be the community? Whether it's a Christian community, or it's a Muslim community, whether it's a community of a certain set of language family. You understand the history of the community. Understanding of the history of the community will bring to you as an understanding of your identity. What identity you have got, what standing you have got within the community, what standing you have got as a member of the community in the larger society. You get a sense of your being, your sense of your self when you understand the history of the community. If it's a Christian community, study its history. Study the history of Christianity. Study the valleys and the mountains, the ups and downs that the Christianity had to traverse over years as to reach the present stature that it has got. You may find several institutions, but it had a past with a lot of downs, with a lot of painful experiences. It's through several painful experiences that the Christian church has reached this stature. Understand its past, whether it's a Muslim community, the Jain community, understand the community in its historical past. Understand its historical trajectory. Then you will be able to relate with that community far better. Then you feel like you are also traveling along with your forefathers and your predecessors, along with the community and your predecessors and the grandparents. They were also experiencing the same pain. And now you reach a stature where the pain is less, where the suffering is less. But you cannot ignore the scars being put on your body by the painful experiences that you had when the community underwent such suffering moments. So think of things within the community, within society, and this identification with the community gives a different understanding about the self, different understanding about the identity of the individual. So in order to understand the identity of each one of you, you should have an understanding within the community to which you belong. And the journey that the community had to traverse would give you understanding about the reasons why your personality, why your identity look this way.
Thank you, Father.
Okay. Though we have more questions, I'm just asking one last question. Father, you are a proper historian, and can you connect some of the childhood experience, interests, skills, curiosity, habits, engagements that are connected to your present contribution or behavior in working within this discipline of history?
What I would like to say is that when I was young, my social science teachers used to give me good marks. So I always used to stand first in the social studies classes. Those days it was called the social studies. So the fetching higher marks in the social studies always created in me a fascination for the subject. That point of time, I did not look into history or historical roots of any institution or any even on a region. But whatever places I happened to go through, whatever I observe from others, whatever I watch, they remain in my memory when I write about that point of time. So when I wrote many articles about Christian community, about the women in Christian community, or about the Tarawards, or about the church spaces, etc., These memories came afresh at the time of analysis. So they were all vivid pictures. People, that point of time, most of the families had 11, 12 children, or from 6 to 12 children. And I've seen the pain of upbringing of these children from the part of the parents, and the suffering and the poverty that prevailed in many parts of central Kerala during end of 1960s, 1970s. So these are not information that I got from the books, but I have seen directly. I was a witness to all these things. I have seen how people are suffering. I have seen how people are being struggling. I have seen poverty, literally. So I have seen all these things, and I could easily analyze the developments of the 1960s, 1970s. And the case before that, 1950s, 1940s, was no way different. So these childhood memories actually remind me as visual evidence while analyzing or while evaluating many of the arguments and making my substantiations. So I do remember that even many of the places that I visited, many of the routes through which I traveled those years, they are very much familiar in my mind, and very much they were there in my memory when I wrote many of the articles detailing the trade routes, detailing the path of commodity movement. So what I'm trying to say is that things that we encounter at different junctions of time, they may not disappear. They may remain in your memory, may remain in your mind. And when other information, piece of information, and that the right piece of information obtained from the sources, and they give a similar picture, if the sources give a similar picture, then you can easily relate with what you are seeing at your younger age, and then you can embellish the imagery or the picture of trade route or similar type of themes that you are elaborating. And then you can make a good argument because your things are visually there very much in your mind and memory to support you. Because till 1960s, 1970s, most of the villages look the same. They did not undergo radical change. Only after 1970s, 1980s, the changes of significant nature happened. So very often the childhood memories play a big role. And later field studies also helped me a lot to analyze many of the regions about which I had written on the basis of source material. Most of them are written on the basis of source materials of the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, 17th, 20th centuries. But for analysis purpose, the childhood memories really helped me.
And which are the best institutes for studying history, education institute, and places of learning history? Also, the latest trends for doing some researches I mean, most of the students participating are history students. They have completed, some are completing their masters, and some are doing completed their degree. So which are the best institutes, places, also the new trends in history?
The best places may be JNU is one of the best. JNU, Delhi University. Then you can go for Hyderabad and Pondicherry. So if you look at this is on the basis of the hierarchical order. JNU, Delhi University, Hyderabad, then Pondicherry University. If you still want to do a specialization in medieval history, Aligarh is good. For ancient period, JNU is best. But if you want to focus more on Indian philosophy-based studies in history, then Banaras Hindu University is good. If we look at the state universities in Kerala, Kaladi University is the best. In Kaladi for history, Kaladi is the best. Pondicherry Central University is equally good. Goa University is good. Then Baroda MS University, Baroda is good. Punjab University is good. And then Rajasthan University is good. Yadavpur University is good. I mean, probably the fourth in the rank may be Yadavpur University. So these are the best institutions. So always try to go for central universities. And if you don't get central universities, you go for the regional universities, state universities like Kaladi or Goa or Baroda or Rajasthan or Punjab universities. While doing a MA or MPhil, you apply for a PhD in foreign universities. You know, scholarships are available. Very often we are not familiar with it. You can apply to US universities or Canadian universities. Some 18 or 19 students of mine actually went abroad for their research. Some are still there in Vanderbilt University in USA, British Columbia in Canada, and Leiden University in Netherlands. So many students are there. So you can also try to see the possibilities of doing research abroad. Don't spoil. I mean, we just go to the website and then see the specialization of the faculty members. And if you have a theme for research closer to the research interest of the faculty members of the foreign universities, send an email to them. They will be happy to interact with you. And then you can apply to them. And sometimes they also may provide scholarship to you. So think of the possibilities in India and outside. A foreign exposure will obviously change your mindset. And the level of understanding or the vista also may be changed if you get a foreign exposure. So always try to ensure that you get a foreign exposure, either for a short period or for a long period. So this is my...
Okay. And yeah, Father. Anyway, it was a very useful session, and thanks a lot, Father Pius. And in your busy schedule, because you are packing everything and you are so busy with many things, still you found time and you were so happy to allot this much time for us. And as you have told, through the role of history, you have interpreted through your life, because you told you had that option for the poor and recording, documenting the history of the marginalized and the poor in the history, and which you have done, and through that you have given answers to many of the current issues. Thanks and congratulations for such a wonderful contribution to the future generation. And now to the last, our Angeline and Saria Moni will just giving a lot of time.
Good evening, everyone. To one and all present here. Honorable Chief Guest, Reverend Dr. Pius JNU, Reverend Dr. Benny Parati, and all the participants. On behalf of the My Career, My Identity series, I, Angeline, extend a warm welcome to the people in the gathering. I would like to express my gratitude to the all esteemed delegates of the webinar for their presence and contributions to make this webinar a great success. I extend my gratitude to our Honorable Chief Guest, Reverend Dr. Pius JNU, to take out his time from his busy schedule to grace the event. Thank you for inspiring and encouraging us with your words on this special day. Thanks to Dr. Benny Parati for providing immense support to make the webinar successful and to organize a webinar amidst the pandemic. I must thank the organized team, volunteers, working hard for the past few days to make this webinar a success. I congratulate all the participants for their active participation. Thank you, everyone, once again for making it a great success.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Father, and all the participants. So we are ending the